Floor is about as clean as it's going to get. As I always say, if you can't put it back on and you can't take it off, call it patina. And we've set the stage to look at some stuff. My things. Dongamet projects. It all kind of started with this bill hook, let's say. Because when I showed footage of this bill hook, Captain Electro commented that he would like to make a spear. And I said, well, let's make a spear challenge. And I got 3 spears on the go. The one that I started with is actually the one in the middle there, but we'll start with this one. It's beechwood. It was diseased. And it died. And it seasoned itself, standing on the forest floor. And then I came along and made a silly video, which involved chopping this down with an XK&T workhorse, and chopping it down a bit, putting a point on there, and throwing it. At which point I actually lost it for a minute, kind of blended into the forest there. Well, I made a spear. It wasn't a very good one, but it penetrated the earth, and the shock waves reached Patriot Knife and Tools, who made the brilliant suggestion of fire hardening the point. So I did that, about 18 inches up at the point here. I threw it into a dead pine, made a video. I didn't like it, and I deleted it to make space. Bit of a shame though, really, because I did throw it into a pine and get it stuck in there, sticking right out of there. So that's a spear. Now, the first spear that I started making was involving this kitchen knife, this beechwood offcut from the bill hook pole that was just too long. And I did this binding work here with some hemp twine and G-Flex epoxy resin. The dark patches that you see, to the best of my understanding, are from the last time I wet this, and it's so humid that somehow that it just never dried. It's a mystery because I wet it 2 days or 3 days ago. But that's awaiting the final coat of epoxy, just to get into this gap here and cover up everything. But it is good to go, and I have tested this, and it slashes. I put a little recurve into the blade there, very subtle. Can't really almost see a recurve, I guess, but there is kind of one. It's not a very straight edge either, because this was done with small stones and a steel and stuff like that. I didn't really reprofile so much as just go in deeper, thereby unveiling the weeble wobble of the original grind. You can also see that I've bashed on it a bit with a carbide hammer. That would be by way of aligning the blade somewhat with the handle, which I very much doubt that I had it very much aligned when I put it in there, but it wasn't bad. And in any case, the knife wasn't straight to start out. You can bet your life on that, because they rarely are. And this is my latest, so to report on this, not much. I mean, I kept on whittling on this handle here. It was an old axe handle that broke, and I used part of it for my war club. So this is the actual original pommel end. I'm going to fill this hole in somehow because it's no longer really in the right place, and it disrupts the ergonomics on the tip of the pinky there. I noticed that it is a salt and pepper, so I did my best to conserve as much of the pepper. Let me just lick this for a second. Banged my tooth. So, yeah, I did my best to conserve as much of the pepper, whereby I bit in more to the salt side. Hence, you can see the difference there. And this, I did my best to eye up beforehand what I wanted in terms of, what would you call this? Sweep to the profile, right? You can see that there's a fairly significant kink in there because I'm making a short spear that, as this isn't, you can, I will throw this into stuff, and I have, and you can throw it and it'll stick in, but I made it for the purposes of slashing. And it slashes excellently well. Just think of it like a machete, with a very long handle and a short blade. And you can imagine. Much like this, which then came from kind of that thing. As soon as I was making this, I ordered a couple of these cold steel Bushmen. One's going to Captain Electro. And this one, well, I just cracked into it. I was very impressed from the outset with the cutting prowess of this $15 acquisition. It is an excellent survival knife by my lights. You could very easily modify this handle to have it a hollow handle, bung that up, stick a cork in here and put your survival kit in there. And that's not going to fail on you like one of those Rambo knives where they made a hollow handle that was a separate component from the blade. This thing is awesome. I love it. The sheath, however, piece of crap. My advice to Cold Steel, as if they were listening. But, upon reflection, at least, let's say, why put a ferrocerium rod that I haven't even tried yet, but, anyone who's reviewed this says they couldn't get it to work. Probably you just need to strip the finish off, first of all, and then put a 90 degree on there somewhere, and then you'll get it to work excellently. But if you're gonna put this into the package and then put it on a sheath that as soon as you sit on the sheath, I mean to say that this was empty on my belt, and I sat down and I sat on my sheath, as I do with any belt sheath of this size, 15 times a day, I sit on it, right? And that's what happened. And this tear took out the retention and everything. So this isn't even good as a liner for a leather sheath anymore or whatever. Just absolute junk. Telling it how I see it. This is awesome. And the sheath is worse than an afterthought. Take $1 off the price and just sell us this in a Boosie cardboard sheath, right? Okay. Cold Steel. Let's look at some epoxy. Product placement time. G-Flex. I was recommended this by a knife maker friend. He said, that he'd heard that this was really good. So he wasn't using it, but he heard it on the grapevine. And so I went to the one hardware store that I could find that sells it, and I got the thickened one. And it's awesome for knife making because it is a slow cure, but it has this consistency that's kind of like butter at just the right temperature. So you can shape it and it doesn't run and drip and it fills up gaps and everything. And I use this to glue the handles on my bush knife, which are still on strong, and it's just lilac wood with lilac pins straight onto the steel. And I have pounded that knife. I pounded it. And this stuff held. And so that is what I used for this, which it doesn't penetrate very well being thick. So when I then did this binding here, which also isn't finished, and it's got wet, so it's all fluffed up. But then getting into maybe it would be better to use something like this that I just used, which I used the whole thing. But this is what they had at the hardware store, and because the G-Flex is harder to get hold of, I figured, well, it's good enough. That'll be good enough for this, for what I have in mind. You know, there's no way it's going to fail. And it came out solid as a rock. It's very, very hard. You can really tell the difference. Now, in terms of adhesion, in terms of impact resistance, in terms of a lot of things, I suspect that this may be better. It is a high grade. It's a much more expensive and exclusive elite product. But this is just hard, this stuff. It's so solid and clear, and it's a more liquid, so it's easier to work with the binding. And I just found these gloves. I went to another local hardware store. This was all they had. And I thought I would just mention it because Venom Steel. Yeah, you say, what the? But they're lined. And I've always been using the typical blue ones, whatever brand, you know, that everyone has. And they always rip. They always tear on me. Well, not always, but let's say at least a third of the times, they end up ripping. And then I get epoxy on my hand under the glove and I rage. And so far, so good with these guys. 2-layer protection, right? 70% thicker. And as I have stated, although that would be pretty clear to anyone anyway, I'm placing products because I think they're good, not because of any kind of conflict of interest. Yeah, I think this thing is great. I think that if your conscience allows you to buy something that's made in China and you don't know who made it, under what conditions, to be that cheap, and so I do wonder, I do question. However, I got it and it's good.